I used to think I had life figured out. Not in a big, arrogant way, more like the quiet confidence you get when your days follow a rhythm that doesn't surprise you anymore. I had my own place, my own routines, my own little system for getting through the week without needing anyone. I knew where everything was in my kitchen. I knew what time the mail came. I knew which grocery store cashier would actually make eye contact and smile. I knew exactly how loud the pipes would groan in the winter and which floorboard would squeak outside my bedroom door. Living alone wasn't something I was embarrassed about. It wasn't even something I thought about much. It was just my life. And for a long time it was fine, maybe even good. But then somewhere along the way, fine started turning into something else, something heavier, something quieter, something that didn't announce itself at first. It just settled in. I didn't notice it in one big moment. I noticed it in little ones, like standing in front of the refrigerator too long, staring at food I didn't feel like eating, like sitting on the couch with the TV on, realizing I hadn't spoken out loud all day, like waking up from a nap and not immediately knowing what day it was. And I know what you're thinking, because I used to think it too. That's just getting older. That's just being tired. That's just life. But deep down I started feeling something I didn't have words for at the time. I think the closest word for it is untethered. Like my life was still happening, but I wasn't fully connected to it anymore. I didn't tell anyone, of course. People don't like hearing that you're lonely when you're technically functioning. When you're paying your bills and doing your laundry and showing up to work or church or whatever. There's this unspoken rule that if you're still handling it, you're not supposed to admit you're struggling. Not really. Besides, I'd always been the independent one, the one who didn't need help, the one who didn't want to be a burden. That phrase, I don't want to be a burden. I've said it more times than I can count. I said it like it was noble, like it was a strength. But I see it differently now. I see it as fear wearing nice clothes, fear of being in the way, fear of being pitied, fear of needing more than people want to give. For me, living alone started getting hard in the most ordinary, undramatic way possible. Not in some movie scene where I collapse in the hallway with a dramatic soundtrack playing. It was more like the slow accumulation of small problems that didn't have anyone around to help solve them. A light bulb went out in the hallway, and I kept forgetting to replace it. So I just walked through the dark. I started avoiding the basement because the stairs felt steeper than they used to. I told myself it was no big deal. I'd take the laundry down later. Then, later, turned into days. The kitchen faucet started dripping, and I meant to call someone, but it felt like a hassle. It felt like something I should be able to handle. So I put a bowl under it and listened to the tap, tap, tap like it was a clock counting down something I didn't want to name. And then there were the nights. The nights were the hardest. There's a particular kind of silence that only exists in a house when you're alone. It's not peaceful silence. It's not restful. It's more like the air itself is holding its breath. You hear everything. The refrigerator hum, the heater clicking, wind brushing against the siding. Sometimes I'd hear a noise and my mind would immediately go to the worst possibilities. Someone's outside. Something's wrong. I'm not safe. And the thing is, it's not that I was actually unsafe most of the time. It's that I was alone with my fear. When you live with other people, fear gets diluted. You can laugh at it. You can ask someone, "Did you hear that?" and have them say, "It's just the house." But when you live alone, fear can sit right next to you on the couch and you start treating it like company. I started calling my daughter more, not to tell her any of this. God, no, I'd never say, "I'm scared at night," because then it would become real. It would become something she'd worry about. So instead, I'd call her and ask about her day. Ask how work was. Ask what the kids were doing. I'd stretch the conversation longer than it needed to be. Not because I had more to say, because I didn't want it to end. And I could hear it sometimes, the moment her voice shifted slightly, the moment she got distracted, the moment she started wrapping up the call. She wasn't being unkind. She was just busy. She has her own life. She's juggling more than I ever did at her age. But after I'd hang up, I'd stand there holding my phone, staring at the dark reflection of my own face on the screen, and I'd feel this embarrassing ache in my chest, like I'd reached for something and only touched air. The turning point didn't happen all at once. It happened in layers. First, I had my fall. Not a dramatic fall, not an ambulance situation, just a stupid, clumsy fall in the living room when I tripped over the corner of a rug I've had for years. The kind of rug that had never been a problem before. I hit the floor harder than I expected. My knees didn't forgive me the way they used to. My wrist throbbed. And the worst part wasn't even the pain. It was the moment I realized nobody knew. Nobody saw it. Nobody heard it. I sat there on the carpet for a minute, just breathing, waiting for the shock to settle, waiting for my body to decide if it was truly hurt or just insulted. And I remember looking up at the ceiling and thinking, if something happened right now, I could be here a long time. That thought landed inside me like a stone. I got up eventually. I iced my wrist. I moved on. But the next few weeks, something changed. I started moving slower through the house, not because I wanted to, but because part of me didn't trust the space the same way anymore. Like the house I used to know had started making quiet threats. Then came the second layer. I started forgetting things. Not the kind of forgetting where you can laugh it off. Not, where did I put my keys? Forgetting. This was the kind of forgetting that makes you stop and stare at your own hands like they belong to someone else. I'd walk into a room and have no idea why I went there. I'd stand at the stove and feel uncertain about whether I'd already turned it off. I'd repeat stories to my friends and see the tiny flicker in their eyes where they realized I'd told them the same thing last month. It wasn't constant. It wasn't catastrophic. But it was enough to make me feel less steady inside myself. And when you live alone, you don't have anyone close by to notice the difference between normal tiredness and something worth paying attention to. It's just you, trying to interpret your own decline like you're reading a book in dim light. Then the third layer came in the form of something I didn't expect at all. One day I was driving home and I caught myself thinking, if I didn't make it back, how long would it take for someone to find out? And that thought wasn't even born from sadness. It was just practical. That's what scared me the most. I started doing little proof-of-life habits without admitting it to myself. I'd make sure to respond to texts quickly. I'd post something online once in a while so people knew I was still around. I'd show up to gatherings I didn't really feel like attending, just so I wouldn't disappear too quietly. It's strange what living alone can do to you. It can make you both fiercely proud and quietly terrified. It can make you crave company and resist it at the same time. I kept telling myself I was okay. I told other people I was okay. I smiled. I made jokes. I kept my hair neat and my clothes clean. I didn't want anyone to look at me and see the truth. The truth was, I was tired. Not physically tired. Soul tired. The kind of tired that comes from having to be your own emergency contact, your own backup plan, your own witness, your own comfort. And then, of course, came the conversations. My daughter had been patient for years. I know she had. She'd drop hints gently. Mom, have you ever thought about moving somewhere smaller? Dad's old room could be an office if you wanted to stay with us for a while. Wouldn't it be nice to be closer to people? And every time I'd brush it off like she was suggesting something silly. I'm fine. I'm not ready. This is my home. Because it was my home. It held my memories in the walls. It had the marks of the life I built. I could close my eyes and walk through it without tripping. Well, mostly. I knew every corner, every drawer, every sound. Leaving felt like giving up. And I wasn't ready to be the person who gave up. But then she said something one afternoon that hit me differently. She didn't mention safety. She didn't mention stairs. She didn't mention money or logistics. She just said, I worry that you're spending too many days alone. I wanted to snap back. I wanted to say, I like being alone. I wanted to say, I'm not some helpless old woman. but something in her voice made me stop. She wasn't talking about my body. She was talking about my life. And for a moment I saw myself the way she must see me sometimes. Not as a capable adult with a mortgage and a driver's license, but as a person sitting in a quiet house watching the world move on without her. That night I did something I'd been avoiding for a long time. I opened my laptop and started looking up options. I didn't type in nursing home. I couldn't. That phrase still carries a weight in my chest. It makes me picture antiseptic smells and fluorescent lighting, and people parked in wheelchairs staring at TVs they don't care about. I know that isn't fair to every facility out there. I know some places are kind and clean and well run. But the emotional association is there for a lot of us, whether we want to admit it or not. I didn't want to be placed somewhere. I didn't want to feel like my life had been reduced to a problem someone else was solving. But as I searched, I found something I didn't realize existed the way it does now. A middle place. Not a hospital, not a nursing home. Not moving in with my kids like I was a piece of furniture they had to rearrange. A community where people still lived their own lives, in their own apartments, but weren't isolated. A place where you could have privacy without being invisible. A place where someone would notice if you didn't come down for coffee but wouldn't treat you like you couldn't make your own decisions. I stared at the screen for a long time, and I felt my pride rise up immediately. I heard the voice in my head saying, "You're not that person. You're not the kind of person who needs a place like that." But then another voice, quieter and older, said, "Maybe the goal isn't to prove you can do everything alone. Maybe the goal is to live." That thought made me cry, because it felt like permission. I didn't tell anyone right away. I visited one of these places alone, like I was doing something secret. I parked my car and sat for a minute with my hands gripping the steering wheel. I expected to feel depressed the second I walked in, but it didn't feel like what I'd imagined. It smelled like coffee, real coffee, not hospital smell. I heard laughter. Not forced laughter, but the kind that spills out of someone who forgot they were supposed to be guarded. There were people walking around like they belonged there, not like they were waiting for something to end. A woman at the front desk greeted me like I mattered, like I wasn't a problem to be managed. She said, "Take your time, look around, no pressure." No pressure. That phrase meant more than she could have known. I wandered through common areas. I saw little groups of people talking, not performing happiness, just existing together. I noticed a bulletin board with flyers for movie nights and book clubs and things I used to pretend I didn't care about. I watched someone carry a plate of cookies to a table like it was the most normal thing in the world, and then I sat down in a small lounge area, pretending to look at a brochure, and I realized something that startled me. I felt calmer. My shoulders dropped. My breath softened. I wasn't bracing myself for the next sound in the house. I wasn't calculating what would happen if I fell. I wasn't trying to convince myself I was fine. I was just sitting, near other human beings, and it felt natural. That's what I didn't expect. I thought it would feel like defeat. It felt like relief. When I finally told my daughter I'd visited, she didn't throw her arms in the air and celebrate like she'd won. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just looked at me with this expression I'll never forget, like she'd been holding her breath for years and finally exhaled. She said, "How did it feel?" And I surprised myself by telling the truth. I said, "It felt like I could rest." Moving was still hard. I'm not going to lie and make it sound like an inspiring montage where everything magically falls into place. Packing up a home is like unpacking your own history. Every drawer has a version of you inside it. Every closet has a season you forgot you lived through. I found old birthday cards, old photos, clothes I hadn't worn in a decade. I stood in the middle of my bedroom holding a sweater my husband used to love on me, and I had to sit down on the bed because grief still has the power to knock you over. But something else happened during that process too. I realized how much I'd been living around my own sadness, instead of through it. I'd been shrinking my world to make it manageable, and somewhere in that smaller world I started disappearing. The first night in my new place, I slept badly. New walls, new sounds. I missed my old house more than I expected. I questioned myself. I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I'd made a mistake. But the next morning, someone knocked on my door. A woman about my age, smiling, holding 2 cups of coffee like we'd been friends for years. She said, "I heard you moved in yesterday. I'm Linda. Come sit with us if you want." If you want. Again, no pressure. And I don't know why, but that simple invitation cracked something open in me. Because it wasn't someone checking on me like I was fragile. It wasn't someone hovering. It was someone offering me something I didn't realize I'd been starving for. Normal connection. I went. I sat. I listened more than I talked because my social muscles felt rusty. But I was there. I was seen. Over time, I started recognizing faces. People started recognizing me. I started saying hello without forcing it. I started having tiny reasons to get dressed in the morning beyond just because you should. I still have my own space. I still close my door when I want quiet. I still read alone sometimes, still watch my shows, still have my routines. I didn't lose myself. I found parts of myself I thought were gone. And the biggest surprise? I didn't feel less independent. I felt more free. Because independence isn't just doing everything alone. Independence is having choices. Independence is having support nearby so you're not living in survival mode. Independence is waking up without fear sitting on your chest like a brick. Living alone can be peaceful. It can be beautiful. It can be a chapter that makes you strong. But if it starts to feel like you're carrying your whole life by yourself, it's okay to admit that it's getting heavy. I wish someone had told me that sooner. Not in a condescending way. Not like, you can't live alone anymore. But like, you deserve more than just getting by. Because there is something quietly heartbreaking about eating every meal alone, having no one to share the small moments with, no one to notice the changes in your face, no one to laugh with on a random Tuesday. And there is something deeply healing about realizing you don't have to wait until a crisis to change your life. You don't have to wait until the fall is worse, until the loneliness turns into depression, until your family is panicking, until you feel trapped. You can choose a different kind of life before it becomes an emergency decision. I think that's what I've learned the most. There are options in between the extremes. Between white-knuckling it alone and giving up everything you recognize. Between isolation and institutional living. I didn't move because I couldn't take care of myself. I moved because I wanted to keep taking care of myself. Because I wanted my days to feel like they belonged to me again. Sometimes in the evening I sit by my window with a cup of tea. I watch the light change outside. I watch people come and go in the courtyard. I hear faint conversation through the walls, and instead of feeling annoyed, I feel comforted. Not because I need noise, because the sound reminds me that life is happening nearby. And if something happened, if I tripped, if I got sick, if I had one of those moments where the world tilts and you need help, I wouldn't be a secret emergency anymore. I wouldn't be a person who might be discovered days later. I'd be someone people know, someone people would notice. And that doesn't make me weak. It makes me human. I don't know who needs to hear that, but I know I did. If you're living alone and it's starting to feel harder than you expected, you're not failing. You're not pathetic. You're not too needy. You're just at a point in life where the old way of doing things might not fit the way it used to, and there's no shame in wanting something better than just surviving your days. There's no shame in wanting warmth, in wanting conversation, in wanting safety without losing dignity. I still miss my old house sometimes. I probably always will. But I don't miss the way it felt to sit in it, surrounded by silence, pretending I was okay just because I was still standing. Now, when I laugh, someone hears it. When I wake up, I have somewhere to go if I want. And when I feel afraid, I don't have to talk myself down in an empty room. I didn't trade my independence for help. I traded my isolation for a life that feels fuller. And I wish I'd done it sooner.